If You Have Nightmares, We'll Dance on the Bed by LaFay Strent. With warnings for blood, violence, minor character death, and mild gore. Warnings for this chapter: blood mention, off-screen minor character death. Chapter 1. It had been a week since the king and queen disappeared. Selbion was a fairly large kingdom. Delays were expected, but this? I'm worried, Patton admitted. He shifted uncertainly, his armor clinking lightly, yet far too loudly in the eerie quiet. But hey, no news is good news, right? We can't just give up. Roman kept pacing as if he hadn't heard a word he'd said. Eyes glued to the floor, his staccato steps tapped out a rigid line against the study's hardwood floor. Despite not having slept in days, he couldn't bear to rest. Patton sighed. He knew how hard his friend was taking this, how much it pained him to have nothing left to do after they'd exhausted all of their efforts. As a military general, it was his duty to protect both country and crown. Patton could understand that. Being one of the castle guards, he'd spent years around the royal family. He saw them underneath the face of politics, saw their ups and downs, their consideration and love for their citizens second only to each other. Patton saw them as people, as friends, and he didn't want to know what would happen if the king and queen didn't return. Their one and only son was far too young to be an orphan or to take their place. Thomas was a good kid. His parents were good people. Patton had to keep hoping. The alternative was too heartbreaking. Logan, who had been silent at his desk, spoke up. No one is giving up, but as it stands, we are in the middle of a time of war, and when you consider that their majesties and entourage disappeared completely in the midst of traveling, the evidence suggests an answer that does not bode well. I should be out there, Roman grumbled, not for the first time. He still refused to look at them, glaring down at the floor. I'm useless here. You are also running on no energy. Tell me, Roman, when was the last time you've eaten? Roman didn't respond. His pacing increased. You need to slow down, Roman. Bite me, Roman snarled under his breath. Logan offered no quip back. He wouldn't give Roman the fight he wanted. Everything was hurtling downward, trapped in a relentless gravity. Patton felt just as useless as the rest of them. Try as they might to keep the situation discreet, rumors were abound throughout their cities. Their people would start demanding answers soon. And what answer did they have to give? Logan perked up, his writing quill falling limply onto the table. He jumped up and threw open a window. Roman stopped his pacing, and both he and Patton waited with bated breath when a bird landed on the windowsill. It wasn't an ordinary bird, of course. Its body pulsed a light blue light, a clear sign of its magic origins. Logan's hand made contact with the bird, and its body burned bright, the little thing shifting into something more tangible, a scroll. Quickly, Logan untied the bindings and opened it. His eyes darted across the written words. Well? Roman asked, impatient. Say something, damn it! Logan's posture was too stiff, his grip on the parchment too tight. A guillotine's blade hung above them. Their hands were shackled, and all that was left to do was to wait for the inevitable. Their Majesty's carriage has been found. No one was left inside nor around it, though their clothes were laid inside, and everything was covered in blood. Patton covered his mouth, shaking his head as if that would stop it from being real. Logan lowered the scroll. He stared outside the open window. At this time, we can only assume that they are deceased. What could... Patton choked out. Who could have... Who do you think? Roman rasped. This was a message, bold and to the point. The head of their kingdom had been cut off. Cut off the head and the body will flounder. In the darkest depths of the farthest reaches of a forest surrounding the kingdom of Selbion, a nest of nightmares called it home. Humans knew about them, of course, knew the dangers of straying too far, knew to raise their children with warnings of the monsters in the forest who would love to gobble them up. Everyone knew about the Fae, but for the most part they didn't really encounter them, not until recently. Because in recent years, the Fae, who had always been so fond of their forests and were not wont to leave it, had begun venturing out. They'd always had a penchant for bloodshed. as human as their appearance might be, albeit with features just a bit off, too beautiful, too sinister, too unnatural. The Fae showed their disdain and malice towards humans to any poor soul that wandered into their den. But apparently that wasn't enough. They wanted more. Lately they'd been encroaching on Selbion's borders, striking the smaller farm villages on the outskirts until they moved on to bigger prey. Not long after, Selbion declared war on the fair folk. Now, though, the king and queen were dead, leaving behind their only successor, Prince Thomas. Thomas was only 6 years old. Already he's had to face more struggle than any child should, and more is still to come. As the humans ran around, frantic to recover, the Fae rejoiced. Killing the king and queen hadn't been as calculated as believed. It had merely been opportunistic. Right time, right place, right opening to take advantage of, and so they did. The resulting chaos was beautiful. Fae thrived on chaos and the fear that came with it. Well, most of them anyway. Virgil never really shared that sentiment. On and on, the forest had been abuzz with the news of the royals' deaths. So many were foaming at the mouth as they watched the humans tripping over themselves. It incited them for more violence. Greedy bastards that they were, they talked about the little prince and how he should go next. How would their precious kingdom move on then? It hadn't always been like this. Sure, there were many of them who would strike a human down where they stood just for the fun of it, but a lot of them had been rather neutral. They kept to the forests. That's just what they did. They didn't go out looking to be the bringers of humankind's demise. Virgil missed the calm of years past. As he watched others of his kind give in to their thirst for hostility, he kept to himself. Or rather, he tried to keep to himself. Maybe Virgil really was the weird one here, because he'd met a human for the first time decades ago, and he hadn't wanted to claim or maim them. Humans were soft and vibrant and warm in ways his kind weren't. They made Virgil's chest tighten in the most peculiar ache. Virgil, he loved humans. The escalating actions of the other Fae had unnerved him, but hearing the others actively plan to kill the young prince was the last straw. Tonight, Remus promised darkly. Tonight, Deceit agreed. And Virgil knew they were going to go farther than any of them had gone before, that they would go to the capital and infiltrate the castle. So Virgil infiltrated the castle first.